Lethal Vows. Chapter 1. The Taste of Almonds. The first time I realized my wife was trying to kill me, I was halfway through a bowl of mushroom soup, not because I collapsed dramatically at the dinner table, not because my vision blurred or I started coughing blood into a linen napkin like some bad crime film number. I realized because the soup tasted wrong. Tiny difference, almost invisible. A faint bitterness beneath the cream, almonds. Not enough for an ordinary person to notice, but I notice details for a living, or at least I used to. My name is Adrian Mercer, 46 years old, former behavioral analyst specializing in cognitive manipulation, interrogation strategy, and psychological profiling for a private intelligence consultancy most governments publicly denied using. For nearly 15 years, my career depended on detecting inconsistencies so subtle other people dismissed them as imagination. Changes in breathing, delayed eye movement, micro-hesitations before pronouns, tiny shifts in routine. You spend long enough studying human deception, and eventually your instincts stop feeling like thoughts. They become alarms. And the moment that bitter almond taste touched the back of my tongue, every alarm inside me went off at once. Across the table, my wife smiled while candlelight flickered across her wineglass. "Too hot?" she asked gently, concerned voice, perfectly measured, almost convincing. I set the spoon down carefully. "No," I said, just thinking. Claire tilted her head slightly. That head tilt used to destroy me when we were younger. It made her look curious and vulnerable at the same time. Now I recognized it for what it really was: assessment. She was watching me, monitoring, waiting. I lifted the spoon again and pretended to take another sip while my pulse slowed instead of quickened. That surprises people about fear. Real fear often makes trained people calmer. Emotion compresses. The world sharpens. I watched steam rise from the soup while memories quietly reorganized themselves inside my head. The fatigue over the past 6 months, the dizziness, the stomach pain, the headaches, my sudden weight loss. Doctors blamed stress, overwork, middle age. One specialist suggested burnout. Another asked if I was depressed. Claire attended every appointment looking devastated and supportive. Devoted wife, concerned caretaker. She held my hand while discussing treatment options. She researched diets, bought supplements, cooked healthier meals, and somewhere inside those meals, she was slowly poisoning me. I looked up at her and smiled faintly. "You worked hard on dinner." Relief flickered across her face so quickly most men would have missed it. "Yes," she said softly. "I wanted tonight to feel special." Special, interesting word choice. I took another fake sip while discreetly letting the liquid touch only my lips. Bitter almond again. Small, controlled. Not enough to kill quickly. Enough to weaken, to deteriorate, to create medical confusion. That meant patience, premeditation, planning. This wasn't rage poisoning. It was strategy, and that realization hurt more than the poison itself, because it meant Claire had spent months watching me suffer, sleeping beside me while my body slowly deteriorated, kissing me goodbye each morning while wondering whether the dosage would finally become fatal. There are moments in life when reality fractures quietly. No dramatic soundtrack, no explosion, just a tiny internal shift where the world before and after separates permanently. This dinner became that moment for me. Across the table, Claire tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear and smiled again. Beautiful, composed, deadly. "How was your meeting today?" she asked. I almost laughed. She was still maintaining normal conversation, which meant she either believed the poisoning remained undiscovered or she was an extraordinary psychopath, possibly both. "Productive," I answered calmly. "What were you working on?" "Human behavior." That answer amused me privately, because technically it was true. Claire smiled softly and sipped wine. God, I loved this woman once. Maybe part of me still did. That's the terrible thing about betrayal inside marriage. Love rarely dies before trust does. Sometimes it survives long afterward like a phantom limb. I remembered the first night we met 12 years earlier in Chicago. Rainstorm outside. Jazz bar downtown. Claire laughing at something I said while bourbon glasses reflected amber light between us. She had warmth back then, or perhaps she simply performed warmth more convincingly. Either possibility frightened me now. "You seem distracted lately," she said carefully. There it was again. Assessment disguised as concern. I leaned back in my chair slightly. Do I? Yes. How so? Claire shrugged gracefully. Distant, tired. Poisoned, Claire. The word echoed silently inside my head. I wonder how often you practice these conversations after deciding to murder me. I smiled gently instead. Probably stress. Her eyes studied me carefully. You should rest more. Translation. You are getting weaker. I took another fake spoonful, then another. Building confidence. Never reveal discovery too early. That's the first rule of survival when someone believes they control your vulnerability. Let them continue believing it. People become careless inside false security. Claire stood after dinner and carried the dishes toward the kitchen. I watched her movements carefully. No visible nervousness, no shaking hands, no hesitation, experienced or emotionally detached. I followed a minute later carrying my bowl. She turned at the sink smiling faintly. Thank you. I kissed her cheek softly. Her body relaxed instantly. Confirmation. She still believed I suspected nothing. Good. Very good. Because in that moment, standing beneath warm kitchen lights with poison still burning faintly on my tongue, I made a decision. I was not going to confront her. I was going to study her, and then I was going to destroy her psychologically so completely. She would beg for truths I refused to give. Not quickly, not violently. Precisely. People imagine revenge as anger. They're wrong. The best revenge resembles architecture. You build pressure slowly until the target collapses beneath the weight of their own fear. At 11:14 a.m. p.m., Claire fell asleep beside me, or pretended to. I lay motionless in darkness listening to her breathing while moonlight spilled softly across the bedroom ceiling. Then slowly, silently, I slid from bed. The house felt different tonight. Not familiar anymore. Weaponized. Every surface suddenly carried hidden implications. Coffee cups, medication bottles, cooking utensils. How long had this been happening? I moved downstairs barefoot and entered my office. Unlike most people, I never fully abandoned my old professional habits after leaving the consultancy. Certain tools remained useful: encrypted drives, behavioral archives, forensic contacts, ghosts from another life. I switched on the desk lamp. No overhead light. Never overhead light. Then I opened a locked case inside the lower drawer and removed a compact chemical field kit I hadn't touched in nearly 4 years. My pulse remained perfectly steady. That frightened me a little. Not because calmness is abnormal, because part of me had apparently transitioned from husband to investigator almost instantly. Maybe that says something ugly about me. Or maybe survival strips away illusion faster than morality. I extracted a tiny soup sample from the bowl I'd secretly preserved inside a sealed container, then began testing. 15 minutes later, I stared silently at the result. Strip beneath the lamp, positive cyanogenic compounds, not enough concentration for immediate death. Microdosing, gradual deterioration. I leaned back slowly in my chair, and for the first time all night, I allowed myself genuine emotion. Not rage, grief. Claire truly intended to kill me. Not fantasized about it, not threatened it in anger, planned it, executed it repeatedly, methodically. I closed my eyes briefly, while memories flooded back through a new horrifying lens. Her insistence on handling my meals lately, the supplements she organized personally, the herbal teas before bed, the concern when symptoms worsened. My God, she had enjoyed caregiving while causing the illness. That realization chilled me more than the poison. At 12:02 p.m. a.m., I opened a fresh encrypted file on my laptop. Case designation: Claire Mercer, Domestic Threat Assessment. I stared at the title for several seconds, then deleted threat assessment, replaced it with behavioral collapse strategy. Better, cleaner, more accurate. If Claire wanted a psychological war, she had married the wrong man to start one with. I began documenting everything: symptoms timeline, food patterns, behavioral inconsistencies, medical visits, financial records. Then I found something interesting. 3 months earlier, Claire dramatically increased her life insurance review activity. Not payout changes, verification procedures, beneficiary protections, legal consultation, scheduling. Interesting. Very interesting. I opened another window and quietly accessed our financial records. And there it was. The second betrayal, hidden debt. Large hidden debt. Claire had been moving money through private credit channels connected to luxury purchases, speculative investments, and something else far more revealing, recurring transfers to a man named Ethan Vale. I stared at the name carefully. Recognition came slowly, then fully. Ethan Vale, 42, private equity consultant, recently divorced, known for predatory acquisition behavior both professionally and romantically. Claire wasn't just poisoning me, she was replacing me. The simplicity of it almost impressed me. Slowly weaken husband. Collect insurance. Transition into new life with new man. Elegant in a monstrous sort of way. I should have felt hatred then. Instead, I felt disappointment. Claire could have left. She could have divorced me. Taken half. Walked away honestly. But people driven by greed rarely choose clean exits when manipulation promises larger rewards. I spent the next 3 hours reconstructing her hidden life piece by piece. Encrypted messaging apps, hotel overlaps, private account movements, everything. By 3:47 a.m., I understood something crucial. Claire believed herself intellectually superior to me. That arrogance would become the weapon that destroyed her, because overconfident liars always assume emotional people behave predictably after betrayal. Anger, confrontation, violence. Desperation. She expected discovery eventually, perhaps, but not analysis. Certainly not patience. At 4:12 a.m., I heard footsteps upstairs. Claire awake. I closed the laptop instantly and switched to a harmless financial report. Seconds later, she appeared in the doorway wearing one of my old gray shirts. Barefoot. Beautiful. Poisonous. "You are awake?" she asked softly. "Couldn't sleep." Concern crossed her face immediately. Again, almost convincing. "Headache." "Yes." Technically true. She walked behind my chair and rested her hands gently on my shoulders. "I worry about you." The performance was extraordinary. If I hadn't tested the soup myself, I might still have believed her. I tilted my head slightly toward her touch. "Thank you." Claire kissed the top of my head softly, and in that moment, I realized something chilling. She wasn't nervous because she thought she was winning. That level of confidence creates blindness, which meant the next phase would require extraordinary precision. I wasn't going to expose the poisoning immediately. I was going to trap her psychologically first, slowly, carefully. I wanted Claire to experience uncertainty, then paranoia, then fear. I wanted her waking up every morning, wondering how much I knew, wondering who else knew. Wondering whether every conversation concealed hidden accusation, because psychological collapse is far more devastating than legal punishment alone, especially for manipulative people. Manipulators survive through perceived control. Take away certainty, and they implode beautifully. Claire squeezed my shoulders gently. "Come back to bed." I looked up at her, at the woman I once trusted more than anyone alive, then smiled softly. "In a minute." She nodded and disappeared upstairs again. The moment she was gone, I opened a new document. Phase 1. Colorado Evidence Preservation. Because before you destroy someone psychologically, you must first make absolutely certain they feel safe. Everyone has a story. Some are about love, some are about betrayal, and some are about the moment a quiet person finally stopped being underestimated. Welcome to Vengeance Narratives, where revenge is intelligent, psychological, and unforgettable. If you've lived through betrayal, humiliation, deception, or silent heartbreak, share your story with us. Your experience could inspire the next gripping narrative. Because the most dangerous stories are the true ones. Subscribe, like, and share. It will help our channel grow. Chapter 2. Confidence Preservation. The next morning, I kissed my wife goodbye before she left to buy more poison. That's the sort of sentence that changes a man permanently. Claire stood near the front door in a cream-colored coat with her dark hair pinned back loosely, looking elegant enough to belong in a perfume advertisement. Morning sunlight spilled through the glass beside her while she adjusted one of her earrings. "You are pale," she said softly, concerned wife voice again. Perfectly calibrated. "I barely slept. You should stay home today." Translation. "You are getting weaker." I smiled faintly. "I'll survive." The word survive hung invisibly between us. Claire stepped closer and touched my cheek. Her hand felt warm. Steady, no guilt. That fascinated me more than anything else. Most people imagine poisoners as emotionally unstable monsters, wild-eyed lunatics operating from rage or madness. Real poisoners are usually patient, practical, emotionally compartmentalized. Claire wasn't trying to murder me because she hated me. Hatred would have been easier to understand. She was trying to murder me because I had become inconvenient. T here is something deeply horrifying about being reduced to an obstacle by someone who once whispered they couldn't imagine life without you. "I'll make soup tonight," she said. I almost laughed. "Sounds good." That tiny flash of satisfaction in her eyes nearly broke my heart. Not because she enjoyed hurting me, because she genuinely believed she was smarter than me. The arrogance of deception is always the deepest wound. After she left, I remained standing near the front window watching her walk toward the black Audi parked outside. And then I noticed something interesting. She checked her reflection in the car window before getting inside. Not vanity, anticipation. That meant she wasn't running errands. She was seeing him. Ethan Vale. I memorized the license plate automatically as she drove away, even though I already knew it. Old habits. Always gather details. I waited exactly 6 minutes before moving. Not 5, not 10, 6. Long enough to avoid obvious reaction patterns if she unexpectedly returned. Then I entered the kitchen wearing latex gloves. People become careless inside familiar environments. They believe domestic spaces protect them from scrutiny. But kitchens tell stories beautifully, especially poison kitchens. I started with the spice cabinet. Nothing unusual. Then supplements. Interesting. Very interesting. Claire had reorganized everything recently. Alphabetical now. Claire hated alphabetical organization. She preferred visual grouping, meaning the supplements had been rearranged for functionality, not aesthetics. I examined each bottle carefully: vitamin D, magnesium, fish oil, sleep support. Then I found the melatonin capsules. The seal looked untouched. Too untouched. I opened the bottle carefully. Inside, the capsules were slightly different shades, subtle, nearly invisible. I placed one beneath a portable lens from my field kit. Tampered. Not factory inconsistency. Manual refill. I sat quietly at the kitchen counter for several seconds staring at the capsule. There it was. Physical confirmation beyond the soup. Claire wasn't improvising anymore. She had developed process, procedure, routine. That meant escalation. People grow bolder when repeated harm goes undiscovered. I photographed everything methodically before resealing the bottle precisely as found. Then I checked the trash. Never underestimate trash. Human beings reveal themselves constantly through disposal patterns. Receipts, packaging, fragments. At the bottom, beneath coffee grounds and produced scraps, I found a torn pharmacy bag from a compounding supplier in Arlington. Not local, specialized. Interesting choice. I photographed the label and memorized the store. Then I cleaned the area carefully enough to leave zero indication anyone had searched it. That matters. When building psychological traps, preservation of enemy confidence is essential. Fear introduced too early creates caution. Caution slows mistakes. And I needed Claire comfortable. By noon, I sat in my office reconstructing her behavioral patterns over the previous year. It's amazing what people reveal once you stop interpreting their actions emotionally. Claire's affair with Ethan likely began 11 months earlier. Her financial desperation intensified around the same time due to catastrophic investment losses she concealed from me. Margin exposure, private debt, luxury overspending. Then came my health decline approximately 4 months later. Not coincidence. Timeline alignment matters. I opened another encrypted file. Subject profile, Claire Mercer under psychological traits. I typed high-functioning narcissistic adaptation, masked through emotional intelligence performance, strong manipulation capability. Avoidant accountability patterns, requires perception of control to maintain emotional stability. Then after a moment, I added underestimates quiet men. That one felt personal. At 1:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. Claire, hey, I answered warmly. How are you feeling? Weak, concerned, monitoring? Better today, actually. Silence. Tiny silence. There it was. Disappointment. Almost microscopic, but present. You sound stronger, she said carefully. I rested. That's good. I leaned back slowly in my chair. Time for the first move. Not confrontation suggestion, tiny psychological pressure. I had the strangest dream last night, I said casually. Oh. Yes, someone was poisoning me. Silence, absolute silence. Then a laugh. Too fast. Oh my God, Adrian. Funny, right? You've been watching too many thrillers. I smiled faintly into the phone. I suppose. Claire recovered quickly after that, very quickly, but not perfectly. Her breathing changed for nearly 20 seconds afterward. Faster, shallower, fear. Good. Not enough to alarm her completely, just enough to create internal static. The first crack. After hanging up, I wrote one sentence in my operational notes. Subject responds to implied knowledge with autonomic stress. Excellent. By evening, I was ready for phase 2. Not exposure, disorientation. Claire returned home carrying grocery bags and wearing the exhausted expression of a loving spouse, caring for an increasingly ill husband. Oscar, worthy performance. How was your day? She asked while unpacking vegetables. Interesting. How so? I realized something. Tiny pause. What? People reveal themselves slowly. Claire glanced at me briefly. What does that mean? I shrugged lightly. No idea. Just thinking out loud. There it was again. That flicker behind her eyes. Micro anxiety. Beautiful. She made chicken that night. I did not eat it. Not directly anyway. Instead, while she poured wine in the dining room, I switched plates using a maneuver, so practiced it felt almost insulting. Claire unknowingly served herself the poisoned portion. I watched carefully as she took 3 bites during dinner, then stopped suddenly. My pulse remained perfectly calm. Interesting. Had she tasted it? Her expression wasn't fear, confusion. She glanced at her plate briefly, then at mine. Assessment. I smiled softly. Everything okay? Yes, she answered quickly. But she didn't take another bite. That told me something critically important. Claire did not trust her own poison completely. Poisoners rarely do. That's the hidden psychology nobody talks about. People willing to murder still fear becoming victims themselves, especially intelligent murderers, which meant the trap would work even better than I originally imagined. Later that night, while Claire showered upstairs, I entered her home office for the first time in months. Carefully, methodically, the room smelled faintly of perfume and printer ink. Organized chaos, fashion magazines beside financial records, candles, stationery, hidden panic. I opened the bottom drawer of her desk, locked. Predictable. I bypassed the lock in under 30 seconds. Inside sat exactly what I expected. Debt statements, private loan notices, and a burner phone. There it was. The real marriage. I powered the phone carefully using a shielded battery adapter to avoid network activation. Messages appeared instantly. Ethan, how much longer? Claire, he's getting weaker. Ethan, you sure the dosage won't raise suspicion? Claire, they already think it's neurological. I stopped reading for a moment. Not because I was shocked, because seeing your murder discussed casually by your wife creates a kind of emotional numbness beyond anger. 12 years together, reduced to dosage management. I continued. Ethan, when this is over, we disappear for a while. Claire, I know. Then the final message sent 3 nights earlier, Claire. Once the policy clears, we can finally breathe. I stared at the words for a long time. Once the policy clears, that was my life now. Insurance timing, financial inconvenience, administrative delay. I photographed every message carefully before replacing the phone exactly where found. Then I noticed something else hidden beneath the paperwork. A small velvet box, jewelry perhaps. I opened it slowly. Inside rested a silver key. Not house key, not safety deposit key. Storage unit. Interesting, very interesting. I pocketed the key carefully. At 11:16 a.m. p.m. Claire climbed into bed beside me, wearing silk and smiling softly. How's your stomach tonight? Better again. That tiny disappointment. God, what a terrifying thing disappointment becomes when your spouse expects your decline. Claire rested her head lightly against my chest. Once that would have comforted me. Now every touch felt strategic. "You know I love you?" she whispered. I almost asked why. Why say it now? Why perform intimacy while planning murder? But I already knew the answer. Manipulators need emotional consistency to stabilize their self-image. If Claire stopped pretending affection entirely, she'd be forced to confront what she truly was. And Claire desperately needed to believe she remained a good person. That's common among poisoners. They redefine murder as necessity, self-preservation, freedom, escape, anything except evil. I wrapped an arm around her gently, and in that moment, another realization arrived. Claire wasn't my real target anymore. Fear was. I was going to turn her own mind against her until she no longer trusted herself, until every sound inside the house felt threatening, every glance suspicious, every silence loaded with hidden meaning. Psychological collapse requires isolation first, then uncertainty, then anticipation. Claire had already begun phase 1 without realizing it, because now she wasn't entirely certain whether I knew. And uncertainty is poison far more effective than anything she slipped into my food. At 2:08 a.m., I quietly left bed and drove to Arlington. The compounding pharmacy sat inside a dark commercial plaza near the interstate closed. But businesses reveal themselves externally long after hours. Shipping labels, disposal bins, security vendors. Within 12 minutes, I identified the supplier network connected to the compounds Claire likely used. Not illegal. That was the clever part. Small quantities. Specialized formulations. Minimal traceability. Claire had researched this carefully, which meant she either received guidance or Ethan Vale was far more involved than I initially believed. At 2:41 a.m., I sat inside my car staring at the silver storage key beneath dashboard light, then finally smiled, because I understood the next move perfectly. Not confrontation, not police. Number. I was going to let Claire continue poisoning me, and while she slowly tried to kill me, I was going to dismantle her sanity piece by piece until she confessed to crimes nobody had accused her of yet. By the time this ended, death would have been kinder than what I planned to do to her mind. Chapter 3. The First Fracture. The storage unit was 23 minutes from our house. Industrial district. Low surveillance. Minimal foot traffic. Exactly. The kind of place people choose when they believe secrecy is temporary. I arrived at 3:18 a.m. beneath cold rain and sodium parking lot lights that turned everything jaundiced and unreal. Unit 214. The silver key opened it smoothly. No hesitation, meaning Claire accessed it regularly enough to maintain the lock. I rolled the metal door upward slowly, and immediately understood my wife had been planning my death far longer than I imagined. The storage unit wasn't filled with random clutter. It was preparation, luggage, archived documents, plastic bins labeled only with colored stickers, and against the far wall, new furniture still wrapped in protective plastic. A new life waiting patiently for my removal. That hurt unexpectedly. Not because Claire wanted another future, because she had physically built it in advance, while still sleeping beside me every night. I stepped inside carefully, methodically, no emotional decisions. Always observe first. The first container held financial records, debt restructuring plans, insurance projections, property searches in Arizona. Arizona. Warm weather. New identity. Fresh start. Claire and Ethan had already chosen where they planned to disappear after my death. I continued searching. The second bin contained clothing and personal documents. Women preparing to flee relationships usually pack emotionally photographs. Memories, keepsakes. Claire packed strategically. Passports, tax records, cash reserves. No photographs of me. None. Not even accidentally. Interesting. The third container changed everything. Inside sat a leather folder labeled Main Dickle. My pulse slowed instantly. I opened it, and there they were. Printouts, research articles, toxicology summaries, highlighted sections discussing cumulative cyanogenic exposure symptoms, dosage thresholds, detection avoidance. My wife had created a murder manual. I sat quietly on the concrete floor, staring at the papers while rain tapped softly against the storage roof overhead. Then I found the notebook, black leather. Small, precise handwriting. Claire's handwriting. I opened to the first page, symptoms improving. Doctor still uncertain, need lower dosage temporarily. My chest tightened slightly. Not rage recognition. This wasn't impulsive anymore. Claire had operationalized my deterioration. I turned another page. Appetite decreasing naturally. Weight loss noticeable now. Continue emotional support. Emotional support. Jesus Christ, I kept reading. Need him weaker before final escalation. No sudden changes. Patience matters. I closed the notebook carefully. T here is a dangerous moment during betrayal, when pain transforms into something colder. Cleaner. You stop mourning the relationship and start studying the enemy. I crossed that threshold inside storage unit 214. By the time I left 40 minutes later, I understood 3 things with absolute certainty. First, Claire intended to kill me within the next 60 days. Second, Ethan Vale believed himself untouchable. And third, neither of them had the slightest understanding of the psychological environment I was about to create around them. At sunrise, I returned home and slipped quietly back into bed beside my wife. Claire stirred softly against my shoulder. Warm, trusting, murderous. I watched her sleeping face while dawn light slowly entered the room. How many nights had she laid awake wondering whether the poison was working? How many mornings had she smiled at me while tracking symptoms internally like progress reports? I touched her hair gently, and for one terrible second, I almost woke her up and asked why. Not accusatory, not angry, just honestly. Why? Why not leave? Why not divorce me? Why this? But people who poison slowly rarely operate from simple motives. Murder becomes emotional accounting. Claire believed she deserved freedom without financial loss, deserved luxury without consequence, deserved Ethan without complication. And I had become the obstacle between her and the life she thought she earned. At 8:05 a.m., Claire opened her eyes and smiled sleepily. You are up early. Couldn't rest. Concern immediately crossed her face. Head tilt, soft eyes, caretaker mode. What hurts today? Everything, stomach mostly. She kissed my cheek gently. I'll make tea. Of course you will. I smiled faintly. Thank you. As she left the room, I noticed something subtle but important. Claire checked my bedside water glass before picking it up. Tiny glance. Quick assessment, monitoring intake. The level of control she maintained was astonishing, which meant disrupting that control would destabilize her quickly. Very quickly. That day became the official beginning of the trap. Not evidence gathering, not survival. Psychological erosion. I started small. Always start small. At lunch, Claire brought me soup while I sat reading in the den. I looked up at her warmly. You know what's strange? What? I keep having this feeling someone's watching me. Tiny freeze. Not visible to ordinary people, devastatingly visible to me. Claire recovered almost instantly. You are probably anxious. Maybe. I accepted the soup, set it beside me, didn't touch it. Claire lingered in the doorway longer than necessary, waiting, watching. Good. I looked directly at her and smiled softly. You've been amazing through all this. That unsettled her more than accusation would have, because gratitude creates moral friction, especially in guilty people. That evening, I made the second move. I left one of the toxicology printouts from storage unit 214 partially visible beneath papers on my office desk. Not obvious. Accidental. Looking. Then I waited. At 7:42 p.m. Claire entered the office carrying laundry. 30 seconds later, she stopped moving. I watched through the hidden reflection in the darkened monitor screen, her eyes fixed on the paper instantly. Breathing changed. Pupils widened slightly. Fear. Real fear this time. She stepped closer carefully and read the visible headline. Cumulative cyanide microdosing. Diagnostic challenges. Then she looked toward the hallway sharply, assessing whether I was nearby. Excellent. Claire stood perfectly still for nearly 10 seconds, then quietly returned the paper to its original position and left the room. No confrontation. No questions. Interesting. That meant she was uncertain whether the document was intentional. Perfect. Uncertainty is where paranoia begins breeding. At dinner, Claire overperformed normalcy. Too much smiling, too much conversation, too much eye contact. People trying to appear calm almost always become more animated than usual. How's the soup? She asked casually. I tasted it slowly. No bitterness tonight. Interesting adjustment. Good, I answered. Relief flickered across her face. There it was. Claire had changed the dosage immediately after seeing the toxicology paper. Fear was already altering her behavior. Better than I expected. Later that night, while brushing her teeth, she asked casually, "Have you been researching your symptoms online?" I met her eyes in the bathroom mirror. Some. What kind of things? Poison mostly. The toothbrush stopped moving, just for half a second, then resumed. "You shouldn't scare yourself like that." I smiled faintly. "Shouldn't I?" Claire spit into the sink carefully. "You think someone's poisoning you?" "Not. That's ridiculous." "Interesting. I think people are capable of strange things when money becomes involved." That landed hard. Her face lost color slightly, then she laughed softly. "You sound paranoid." "No," I said quietly, "just observant." She slept poorly that night. I could tell by the movement, the shifting, the shallow breathing, the repeated waking. Good, very good. Because guilty minds require stability to maintain deception. Disrupt stability, and they begin sabotaging themselves. At 2:11 a.m., Claire quietly left bed. I waited 30 seconds before following silently. Downstairs, dim kitchen light illuminated her standing motionless near the counter, thinking. The poison capsules sat in front of her. Interesting. She stared at them for a very long time, then finally whispered something under her breath. "No. Fear. Actual fear. Not remorse. Not guilt. Fear of discovery." I remained hidden in darkness, watching my wife psychologically fracture in real time. Then she did something fascinating. She opened her phone and called Ethan. No greeting, just immediate panic. "I think he knows." Silence while Ethan spoke. Claire shook her head. "No, I am telling you something changed." Pause. "He left poisoning articles out deliberately." Another pause. Then quieter. "No, he keeps saying strange things." I smiled faintly in darkness. "Good. Excellent." Ethan was about to become part of the experiment too. Claire listened another moment before speaking again. "What if he's testing me?" That sentence nearly made me laugh aloud. Because yes, Claire, that is exactly what I was doing. Ethan apparently reassured her because her breathing slowly stabilized afterward. Then she said something extremely revealing. "I am scared of him lately." I leaned against the hallway wall silently. That mattered. Not because she feared violence. Claire didn't think I was physically dangerous. She feared uncertainty. People who manipulate emotionally require predictability from others. My calmness was becoming terrifying to her because she no longer understood what I knew. And confused manipulators deteriorate rapidly. The next morning, I escalated slightly. Over breakfast, I slid a folded newspaper toward Claire. An article had been circled in red ink. "Local investor charged in spousal poisoning case." Claire stared at the article silently. Then at me. "I haven't read that yet," she said carefully. "I thought it was interesting." "Why?" I sipped coffee calmly. The wife made the same mistake repeatedly. Claire's fingers tightened slightly against the paper. "What mistake?" She assumed slow poisoning meant psychological safety. Silence. Absolute silence. Then finally, "What does that mean?" I smiled gently. "It means murder becomes terrifying once the victim starts watching back." Claire barely touched breakfast after that. Her appetite was collapsing. Interesting psychological mirroring. By afternoon, she made her first major mistake. She searched my office while I was home. Not thoroughly enough, not professionally enough, but emotionally enough. I watched remotely through the hidden security camera while sitting in my parked car 2 blocks away. Claire moved quickly through drawers, files, shelves, looking for evidence. Confirmation. Fear had officially replaced confidence, and once confidence disappears, manipulators become clumsy. At 4:26 p.m., she found exactly what I wanted her to find, a sealed envelope labeled, "If something happens to me." Claire froze completely, then slowly opened it. Inside was a single handwritten sentence. The hardest part was pretending not to know who was feeding it to me. That broke her. Physically, I watched her sit down hard in my office chair while blood drained from her face. Then she started crying. Not performative crying. Actual panic. Beautiful. Not because I enjoyed her suffering, because the architecture was working perfectly. For the first time since poisoning began, Claire no longer felt in control, and that meant the real collapse was finally beginning. Chapter 4. The poisoner's panic. Fear changes the atmosphere inside a house. You can feel it in silence first. Not loud silence, not angry silence. Careful silence, measured footsteps. Half-finished sentences. Doors closing too softly. 3 days after Claire opened the envelope in my office, our home no longer felt like a marriage. It felt like an interrogation room neither of us acknowledged. And Claire was deteriorating faster than I anticipated, not externally. Externally, she remained composed, elegant clothes, controlled voice, perfect makeup. But psychologically, cracks everywhere. She started watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, studying my expressions, trying to determine what I knew, how much evidence existed, whether she was still safe. The beautiful thing about uncertainty is that intelligent people torture themselves more effectively than enemies ever could. At breakfast on Thursday morning, Claire added sugar to her coffee 3 separate times because she forgot she'd already done it twice. That's not absent-mindedness. That's cognitive overload. Her mind was splitting attention between performance and fear. I watched calmly while pretending to read financial news. "You seem tired," I said gently. Claire looked up too quickly. "What? You didn't sleep much." "I slept fine." Lie, the dark circles beneath her eyes said otherwise. I nodded slowly and returned to the paper, then added casually, "You were talking in your sleep." The coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. My God, the reaction was magnificent. Not dramatic, tiny. Human beings always reveal truth through interruption. Claire set the cup down carefully. "What did I say?" I folded the newspaper slowly. "You don't remember?" "Number," I smiled faintly. "It wasn't important." Then I stood and walked out of the kitchen. That single exchange haunted her the entire day. I know because she called me 4 separate times before noon pretending ordinary concern. "Did you eat lunch? How's your headache? Do you need anything from the store?" Monitoring questions. Fear disguised as affection. Good. At 2:16 a.m. p.m., she made another mistake. She contacted Ethan from her personal phone instead of the burner. Sloppy desperation creates laziness. I intercepted the call metadata remotely through software I installed years earlier after a corporate espionage incident. Most spouses have no idea how vulnerable home systems really are. Claire and Ethan spoke for 11 minutes. I couldn't hear content yet. Didn't need to. Duration alone told the story. Crisis management. And the timing mattered even more. Immediately after speaking to me, which meant the pressure was working exactly as intended. That evening, I escalated again, subtly. Always subtly. Claire was cooking pasta when I entered the kitchen holding an old photo album. "Our Italy trip?" I said softly. She glanced over cautiously. "Oh, interesting reaction. Not nostalgia, defensiveness." I sat at the counter and slowly turned pages while she stirred sauce at the stove. Florence, Venice, Lake Como. A younger version of US smiled back from every page before greed, before poison, before fear. "You remember this restaurant?" I asked quietly. Claire looked over. "Yes. The owner warned us about bitter almonds in certain wines." The wooden spoon stopped moving, just for a second, then resumed. "That's random. Memory works strangely." I turned another page calmly. "You laughed because I said cyanide smells romantic in old detective novels." Claire set the spoon down carefully now. "You are doing this on purpose." Finally, not confession. Not confrontation, but recognition. I looked up slowly. "Doing what?" "This?" Her voice tightened slightly. "These comments, these weird little references." I held her gaze calmly. "Claire," tiny pause. "Are you nervous about something?" That hit harder than accusation ever could have, because innocent people answer immediately. Guilty people assess first. Claire assessed, and in that hesitation, everything became undeniable between us. "I think you are trying to scare me," she whispered. I smiled sadly. "That implies you already feel afraid." Silence. Heavy silence. Then Claire turned back toward the stove too quickly. Retreat behavior. Excellent. Later that night, she searched the house while believing I slept. I lay motionless upstairs, listening carefully while floorboards creaked below. Office first, then kitchen, then garage. She was looking for evidence, or perhaps hidden surveillance. People under psychological pressure always begin imagining systems around them. That's why paranoia becomes self-generating once introduced properly. At 1:08 a.m., Claire entered the bedroom quietly. She stood beside the bed watching me for a long moment, assessing. I slowed my breathing deliberately. Then she whispered something so softly I almost missed it. "What do you know?" Not angry, terrified. Good. The trap was becoming internal now. That's when psychological operations become irreversible. The next morning, I visited Ethan Vale. Not directly, observation first. Always observation first. His office occupied the 23rd floor of a private equity firm downtown, glass walls. Minimalist furniture. Artificial confidence everywhere. Men like Ethan decorate success before they fully earn it. I watched from a cafe across the street for nearly 2 hours. Patterns matter. Ethan arrived at 8:14 a.m., left twice for calls. Met one brunette consultant at 10:22 a.m. Displayed escalating stress indicators by 11 o'clock a.m. Interesting. Even from distance, I could see it, jaw tension. Shortened stride. Phone, check frequency increasing. Claire's panic was infecting him already. Excellent. At 11:43 a.m., I made the first direct move against Ethan. A courier delivered a sealed envelope to reception. No return address, no fingerprints. Inside was a single photograph. Ethan and Claire together entering a hotel 6 months earlier. On the back, handwritten. Slow poisons leave long shadows. That's all. No threat, no demand. Ambiguity terrifies guilty people more effectively than specifics. I watched Ethan receive the envelope through the building's glass lobby, then watched color drain from his face after opening it. Beautiful. He immediately called someone, Claire most likely. Then another call, attorney perhaps. Then he looked around the lobby sharply, predator. Becoming prey, exactly what I wanted. By evening, Claire was unraveling visibly. She barely touched dinner, hands trembling slightly while pouring wine, eyes constantly studying me. I decided it was time for the next fracture. "How was Ethan today?" I asked casually. The wine glass slipped in her hand. Red wine splashed across the tablecloth. There it was, pure panic. Claire stared at me like she'd been struck physically. "What?" I folded my napkin calmly. "You look distracted. I assumed you were thinking about him." Her breathing became shallow instantly. "How do you know Ethan?" I tilted my head slightly. "You told me about him once." "No, I didn't." "Interesting," she answered too quickly. Fear overrides memory precision. I smiled faintly. "Maybe I am mistaken." Claire stood abruptly. "I am not hungry." Then she left the room. Retreat again. Excellent. I remained seated alone, finishing dinner slowly while hearing muffled movement upstairs. Closets opening. Drawers shutting. Pacing. Claire was spiraling now. Not because exposure had occurred, because uncertainty had become unbearable. At 9:17 a.m. p.m., she confronted me directly for the first time. I was reading in the den when she entered wearing gray sweats and no makeup. Stripped down Claire. The real Claire, perhaps, or the frightened version beneath the performance layers. "Are you investigating me?" she asked quietly. I looked up from the book. What an interesting question. Answer me. I closed the book slowly. "Claire, why would I investigate my own wife?" Another hesitation. God, the hesitations were becoming constant now. Because every question carried hidden landmines for her. "You've changed," she whispered. "Number." I stood calmly. "You've simply started paying attention." That hurt her. I could see it immediately, because deep down, Claire understood something terrible. I had always been observant, always quiet, always analytical. She simply mistook gentleness for blindness. "I think you know about Ethan," she said finally. I walked toward her slowly, not threatening, controlled. Claire actually stepped backward. Fear response. "Interesting. Do you love him?" I asked softly. The question shattered her composure instantly. Not because she felt guilt, because emotional truth had become impossible to navigate safely. She stopped. Couldn't answer. Wouldn't answer. I smiled sadly. That's what I thought. Then I walked past her and upstairs. leaving her standing alone in the den drowning in uncertainty. At 11:52 p.m., Claire made the critical mistake I'd been waiting for. She disposed of the poison. Not all of it. Enough of it. Panic always pushes guilty people toward evidence management eventually. I watched remotely through garage security feeds while she carried a small black bag to the outdoor bins behind the house, hands shaking, looking around repeatedly, breathing hard. No longer composed poisoner. Now frightened amateur. The moment she returned inside, I retrieved the bag carefully. Inside, empty capsules, chemical residue, latex gloves, compounding instructions. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I photographed everything methodically before returning the bag exactly where found. Then I added one extra item, a printed note. 3 handwritten words. Too late now. At 6:14 a.m., Claire discovered the note. Her scream woke the entire house. Not loud, sharp, animal fear. I entered the garage moments later wearing confusion carefully. Claire, she stood beside the trash bin pale as death itself, clutching the note with trembling fingers. What happened? I asked softly. Claire looked at me. And for the first time since this began, I saw genuine terror in her eyes. Not fear of prison. Not fear of exposure. Fear of me, exactly where I wanted her. Chapter 5. The Confession Room. Claire stopped poisoning me 2 days after the note appeared in the garage. That wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was how quickly she collapsed once she realized control was gone. Poison had never really been about killing me. Not entirely. It was about certainty, predictability, power. Every capsule, every altered meal, every concerned smile across the dinner table reinforced Claire's belief that she controlled the direction of our lives. But once uncertainty entered the system, the poison became meaningless. Because fear is stronger than toxins, and guilt is stronger than fear. The house transformed after the garage incident. Claire no longer moved naturally inside it. She drifted through rooms like someone walking across thin ice, watching, listening, waiting for hidden accusation. I became kinder during this phase. That's important. Cruelty would have stabilized her emotionally by confirming conflict. I gave her warmth instead. Warmth becomes unbearable when someone expects punishment. 3 mornings after the note, I made Claire breakfast. Pancakes, coffee, fresh fruit. She entered the kitchen cautiously wearing one of my sweaters and stopped dead when she saw the table. You cooked? I thought you deserved a break. That nearly broke her immediately. Her eyes filled with tears before she even sat down. Interesting. Not because she loved me suddenly, because kindness after guilt feels psychologically violent. Claire sat carefully across from me, hands trembling slightly. You don't have to do this. Do what? This? I poured coffee calmly. You've seemed overwhelmed lately. Silence then quietly. Why are you being so nice to me? I smiled softly. 12 years is a long time, Claire. That sentence haunted her for the rest of the day. I know because she barely spoke afterward, just watched me constantly with exhausted eyes full of calculations she could no longer solve. At 2:13 p.m., Ethan made his fatal mistake. He came to the house, unannounced. Desperate people always accelerate collapse themselves. I saw his Mercedes through the study window before he reached the front door. Claire saw it too. Panic exploded across her face instantly. Good, excellent. She rushed toward the hallway. Don't answer that. I looked up calmly from my chair. Why not? Please. Please. Interesting. Not anger anymore. Not manipulation. Fear. The doorbell rang again. Then Ethan knocked hard. Claire looked physically ill. He can't be here. I stood slowly. Claire. She grabbed my wrist suddenly. The contact startled both of us. Adrian, she whispered. Please. I looked down at her hand gripping my sleeve, then at the woman attached to it. God. She looked exhausted, beautiful, and destroyed at the same time. There was a moment then, a very small moment where I could have ended it gently, confronted her, shown the evidence, called police, walked away. Normal people would have done that. But normal people don't spend years studying human collapse professionally. And Claire had crossed too many lines for mercy without understanding. The doorbell rang a third time. I gently removed her hand from my arm, then opened the door. Ethan Vale stood outside, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. Expensive coat. Perfect haircut. Panic behind the eyes. He froze the instant he saw me smiling calmly. Mr. Mercer. Ethan, Claire appeared behind me. Why are you here? She hissed. Ethan ignored her completely. Interesting. Self-preservation mode now. I think we should talk, he said carefully. Yes, I agreed. I think we should. Claire looked like she might faint. I stepped aside slowly. Come in. The living room became an execution chamber. Not physically, psychologically. Ethan sat rigidly on the couch while Claire remained standing near the fireplace, unable to stop pacing. I sat across from them both, perfectly relaxed. Control positioning matters. Nobody spoke first. Good. Let silence work. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. You've been sending messages. Have I? The photograph. I tilted my head slightly. What photograph? Ethan's jaw tightened. Interesting. He still wasn't sure how much I knew. Beautiful. Claire looked between us frantically. This has to stop. I looked at her gently. What exactly is this? That nearly shattered her composure entirely. Because now she understood the true nightmare. No accusation, no clarity, no stable battlefield. Only uncertainty. Ethan leaned forward suddenly. What do you want? There it was. The question guilty people always ask, eventually terms. Price, escape route. I smiled faintly. You assume I want something. You know about us? Yes. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Ethan continued carefully. You know about the insurance? Yes. And the poisoning. Claire made a broken sound in the back of her throat. There it was. Confession. Direct. Undeniable. Recorded. The hidden microphone beneath the bookshelf captured every word cleanly. I remained silent. Ethan realized his mistake instantly, too late. What did you just say? I asked softly. Claire stared at Ethan in horror. Ethan's face lost all color. Excellent. Absolute perfection. The room went dead silent. Then Ethan stood abruptly. You set this up. I smiled slightly. No, Ethan. You set this up when you helped my wife plan my death. Claire started crying openly now. Real collapse. No performance left. You said he knew already, she whispered at Ethan. I thought he did. You idiot. And there it was. The beginning of mutual betrayal. Pressure always fractures alliances. Eventually, Ethan turned toward Claire furiously. This is your fault. My fault. You panicked. I panicked because he kept playing mind games. I watched calmly while their relationship cannibalized itself in real time. Remarkable how quickly romance dies under survival pressure. You told me the poison couldn't be traced, Claire snapped. Ethan froze. Another confession. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I stood slowly. Both of them immediately stopped arguing. Fear response. Good. Then I said the sentence that finally broke Claire completely. I stopped eating your cooking 3 weeks ago. Silence. Total silence. Claire stared at me with tears streaming down her face. No. Yes. Her knees literally weakened. She sat down hard on the edge of the chair beside her. All this time. I nodded slowly. I knew. That destroyed her more thoroughly than police ever could have. Not exposure. Humiliation, realizing every performance failed. Every manipulation failed. Every poisoned smile failed. She covered her mouth and sobbed violently. I don't understand, Ethan whispered. I know, I said calmly. Then I walked to the bookshelf and removed the recording device. Ethan went white instantly. Claire looked like someone had removed her soul. You recorded us. Yes, Claire shook her head slowly. You planned this. No, I corrected softly. You planned murder. I planned accountability. That mattered to me. The distinction. I wasn't destroying innocent people. I was removing illusion from guilty ones. Ethan moved first. Predictably, fight. Or flight. He lunged toward me, trying to grab the recorder. Amateur mistake. I sidestepped easily, and Ethan crashed into the corner table hard enough to split his forehead open. Blood hit the carpet immediately. Claire screamed. Ethan staggered upright, dizzy and furious, then stopped cold. Because I was suddenly holding the pistol from the office safe, not pointed at him, just visible control. That's all. The room froze instantly. Sit down, I said calmly. Ethan obeyed immediately. Interesting how quickly arrogance evaporates near consequences. Claire stared at the gun with horror. You were going to kill us? I placed the pistol safely on the mantel, visible unused. I wanted you to understand something. Neither spoke. Real danger doesn't scream. I continued quietly. It watches. Claire broke again at that. Because finally, she understood the scale of her mistake. She thought she married a quiet, gentle analyst. She never understood what kind of analyst. I sat down again calmly, then slid a folder across the table. Inside, the toxicology reports, the storage unit photographs, the burner phone transcripts, financial records, insurance modifications, everything. Claire stared at the evidence like she was looking at her own autopsy. Ethan whispered, "Oh my God." "Yes," I said softly. "That seems appropriate." Nobody moved for a long time. Rain tapped softly against the windows outside, while the life we built together decomposed completely in silence. Finally, Claire looked up at me through swollen eyes. "Why didn't you just turn us in?" That answer mattered. I considered it carefully. Then told her the truth, because prison would have been easier. Claire started crying again, not loudly anymore, just empty grief, the kind people make when they finally see themselves clearly and hate the reflection. At 9:42 p.m., I made the final call. Not police. Attorney first. Then authorities. Procedure matters always. Ethan was arrested that night attempting to leave the property. Claire surrendered voluntarily 2 hours later after giving a full recorded statement, but the real punishment had already happened before handcuffs ever appeared. That was the important part. The psychological collapse, the fear, the uncertainty, the realization that every manipulation had been observed quietly from the shadows. Months later, after court proceedings ended, I sat alone beside Lake Superior in a small cabin I rented under another name. Cold wind, dark water, silence. Claire eventually accepted a plea arrangement involving attempted poisoning conspiracy, fraud, and evidence tampering. Ethan received significantly worse. Good. But strangely, victory felt quieter than expected. That's the truth. Nobody tells you about revenge. It doesn't heal you. It simply removes infection. Some scars remain forever. I still remembered Italy. Chicago, jazz music in the rain. The version of Claire who once loved me before greed hollowed her out from the inside. Or maybe that version never existed at all. Sometimes I still wonder. One evening near sunset, I received a letter from Claire in prison. Only 3 sentences. "You were the only person who ever truly saw me." That became unbearable once I realized what you saw. "I am sorry for trying to kill you." I read the letter twice, then burned it in the fireplace. Not from hatred. From completion. Outside, snow began falling softly across the lake while darkness settled over the water. And for the first time in a very long time, I no longer tasted almonds when I drank coffee and